paranormal that cannot be explained by scientific methods.
Told of a creature that was 6.5 to 7 feet tall.
The CIA ran secret mind control experiments.
It's a tale of a creature that's been seen by many, but believed by few.
And experts say there have been reported sightings of paranormal activity.
And there was this creature, and it ran down this hill.
They say something was flying over their house, and they have no idea what it was.
How the world's most powerful individuals are actually shape-shifting reptilians.
My scariest ghost hunting experience.
Jason and JV.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! You can't handle the truth! Put it down!
Beyond reality. Radio.
Sometimes it's the normal, sometimes it's the abnormal, and sometimes it's the paranormal, but it's always beyond reality. Welcome to the show. Great to have everybody here tonight as we get ready to talk about ghosts. That's what we like talking about most on this program. Not just ghosts tonight, though, but we'll be talking about actually a book called Paranormal Confessions. The name of the author is Kristen Lee. She's going to be with us tonight. She's going to be talking about not just the book, but the house that inspired the book. It's a house that she owns. It's called Bel Air, the Bel Air House. And she's going to tell us all about what happens there, her experiences, and a lot of her work, because she's not only an author, but she's also a psychologist and a psychic medium. And, of course, she owns the house as well. So a lot going on in Kristen's life as it relates to the paranormal, and we're going to be talking all about that. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share and do all those things for me, please. If you're in YouTube, please like the program there. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that as well. If you're on our Twitch channel, you can follow. There's no charge for that. If you can subscribe, even better. If you have an Amazon Prime account, you can subscribe on Twitch without the subscription fee. You just link the Amazon Prime account to the Twitch subscription, and there's no charge for that. You just have to renew it each month. So if you're part of our YouTube crowd and you haven't done that in a while, I'd appreciate it if you'd jump on Twitch and do that for me as well. These platforms, as you know, if you watch the political show, you know that we're trying out a whole bunch of new platforms for streaming, because there's so many new ones. As streaming becomes more popular and more people like to enjoy streamed programs or streamed discussions, whatever it happens to be, these streaming platforms are exploding all over the place, and we're still, kind of working through them to determine which ones we like the best. YouTube is still the granddaddy of them all. You've got to be there. Fortunately, this program doesn't fall under the threat of being canceled on YouTube like the political show does. It's awfully ridiculous that that's the case, but it is the case. So it's more important for us to have the backups on the other program. This one, a little bit less important. We've got great shows coming up here. As I've said, we're going to try to do live shows Tuesdays and Thursday nights, and we may increase the frequency. We'll see. Britt and I think it was over the weekend. When was that? I don't remember what night it was, but we jumped on and did a paranormal news update. And I had a bunch of emails, which I should have pre-screened them because they turned out to be a little bit lackluster. But I get these stories all the time, and we'll continue to monitor those. And every once in a while, we'll jump on and we'll see, what the news says about the paranormal. The other thing we might do tonight, depending on how late we go, we might spend a few minutes talking about the latest in the Gabby Petito case. What a tragedy, right? I mean, anybody who's been following this, and the whole nation seems to have been captivated by it. It's such a tragedy. She's such a young, beautiful girl, and on a cross-country trip with her boyfriend, and it met with tragedy. And the more details that come out about this kid, Laundry, I'm not even sure how old he is, but the more details that come out about him, the more he seems like a real shady character. But maybe we'll take a few minutes to kind of see what the update is. What the latest information is. I know that the autopsy results were announced, and they've confirmed they did in fact find her body. They were pretty certain it was anyway. They just needed to do the formality of the autopsy before they could announce it with certainty. But obviously, with tattoos and her age, and that was pretty easy to determine it was her when they found the body. But anyway, it's awfully morbid and it's awfully disturbing. But the story is something we should talk about because they're still looking for this guy. They're still looking for him. And I'm anxious to see what your thoughts are as to where this guy has gone. So at the end of the program, we'll do a little bit of that. I'll let you know. Again, it depends on how much time we have. We'll be talking with our guest, Kristen Lee, for about an hour tonight. So I look forward to doing that. In fact, we'll go to break right now so that we can get into this and get Kristen on the phone and we can begin talking about her book. Again, it's called Paranormal Confessions. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. It's Beyond Reality. If you haven't had a chance to find the podcast version of the show, I encourage you do that. We have a tremendous podcast following, and if you're listening as part of the podcast following, I thank you for doing that. The podcast gets downloaded something in the neighborhood of 10,000 times a day. We have a tremendous number of back episodes on the podcast platform. And again, it's all major podcast platforms, regardless of whether you listen through Apple's podcast store or the Google podcast store. I don't even know what they call them anymore. That's how they changed them so often. I'm never sure. We're also on Spotify and several others, Stitcher, I believe, and several other major podcast platforms, and the show's doing tremendously there. So thank you for that. And the reason the show continues to do so very well is because we have terrific guests, like the one we've got tonight. Kristen Lee is an author, a psychologist, a psychic medium, and a paranormal researcher. She's also owner of the Bel Air House and owner of the Bel Air House Afterlife Research Center. She's written a new book. It's called Paranormal Confessions. We're going to be talking about all that tonight. Kristen, welcome to Beyond Reality. It's so great to have you with us tonight.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So I listed a bunch of things that you do here: author, psychologist, psychic medium, owner of the Bel Air House itself, plus the Afterlife Research Center. That's quite a list of titles, I would say. Some folks would say, like, when you get into psychology and you get into the paranormal, sometimes those things can butt heads. How do you make it all work?
Well, making that part of it work it's not really hard at all. If we look at psychology and we look at paranormal investigators that are coming specifically to the Bel Air House, sometimes we, at least for me, I always know which one is, kind of the one in the corner scared. I always kind of can figure out which one is going to get, more personal experiences. And I just keep my mouth shut and I sit back and I watch. But it does definitely correlate. Psychology does correlate with the paranormal, and the reason is because sometimes when people, like if we're going through an EVP session and or if we're doing like a communication session with different pieces of equipment and somebody hears something, somebody across the table or across the room could hear something completely different than what they heard. And that's no different than free association when we look at psychology. But it does affect the psychologist. It affects all of us, really, on a psychological level. And it also affects us on a physiological level if we bring in the metaphysical part of the energies that we're channeling or the energies that we conjure to circulate around us.
All right, so you use some terms there that I've heard. I'd like to pretend I know what they mean, but I'm not going to because I think it's important we clarify it, though. But you said free association. So is that kind of like... Is that like the Rorschach test, where once somebody can look at an ink blot and come up with something in their mind, and somebody else can look at the same ink blot and come up with something different? Only you're talking about this in a more spiritual sense.
Absolutely, yes, you're absolutely right. That is what is an example of how that I put out there to describe the EVPs. But absolutely, everybody has a different. Everybody is different. Everybody comes from different experiences, different environments, different multicultural diversities and religions. And what they hear, it might mean something to them, but it might not be real data because it couldn't, maybe it's not what the spirits or the energies are saying to us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So talk a little bit more about that, though. When, obviously everybody has something different in their background. A lot of major differences, things like religion or upbringing or culture, whatever it happens to be, and then minor differences just from experiences that we've all had. How do they factor into what you interpret or what you experience, maybe, from a paranormal perspective?
Well, if we go back to just listening to what, say, for instance, we're using the portal, and the portal is very clear. It's a clear channel piece of equipment, and there's no, white noise that's kind of making you think something different, or the white noise is, for me, it's annoying, and for other people, I know it's annoying too. But if you have a clear channel and a name comes through, and it may be Ed, they may not hear that. They might hear just like a verbal, like something like a spirit saying something that isn't Ed, and they would discredit that. They would move on, and possibly it was Ed. So we have to decipher, when we're doing sessions and stuff like that, of course, respect everybody's perspective and everybody's thoughts and opinions. But when there's that, the kicker is this: when it comes through and it says, "I'm not here," when something says or "I'm right here," and it's clear and everybody knows that, and nobody can dispute that. Nobody can say, "No, I thought I heard this," and another person says, "No, I thought I heard this." Then we know for sure that it is actually something that we all heard at the same time, so it is legit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Now, you were talking about, actually doing this in real time and just observing people, but you also work with people after they've had paranormal or supernatural experiences. When you do that, when you're working with folks, and I'm assuming that folks who might seek your help in this regard have had something traumatic happen or something scary or however you want to talk about it, but what do you draw on more when you're providing assistance to that type of person? Is it more of your mental health training, or is it the paranormal experience that you've had?
Well, it's important, when I'm working with people, first of all, find out what's going on. What is going on in their life, because that could be, seeping into their home and as well as their family. So we have to, look at that first. But when, we get down to, okay, well, this person is clearly having some sort of a paranormal experience. A great example is this. There was a lady that had lost her father, and she was the only one that was there with him, and I counseled her throughout that course of time while she was sitting in the hospital, hoping that, family members came to him, like I'll hear about family members come to us to see our loved ones and then take them to heaven. That was in her case. Then when he actually transitioned a few weeks later, the counseling really started because she was having issues in her home. She believed that he was there, and that was good for her. He was sending her messages. She could feel physiological affects like chills, being cold, being touched, stuff like that. And she thought that was beautiful, that was wonderful, because that was Dad. But then it got a little bit worse because, then her son, who was a child, ended up telling her that he was seeing different spirits in the house, and she found him with a fan cord wrapped around his neck, and she got very, very upset Yeah, because she really thinks that there is some sort of a negative entity that's in there to harm him. So then we have to get, kind of like peeling back the onion. We have to go through all of the different layers, not just psychological, but also through the paranormal with metaphysical things and different types of religions and spirits and entities and deities, and find out, kind of piecing the puzzles together and, get a good idea of what it could be, and then start doing some investigating in order to rule things out, to be able to pinpoint what is going on here so I can help this family.
Okay, so everything you just described there, are you part of that process? Because that's way more than a mental health approach, obviously. That's a full-blown paranormal investigation, trying to determine the source of the activity, and I'm assuming take it to the next step and try to either subdue it or eliminate it.
Yes, correct. That is correct. Yeah, it's a mixture. I mean, just because I have the education to be the psychologist, I can do like the psychological assessments. I actually work with a nurse that's there to go over any types of medicines. I'll pull in Carol Lawrence, who is a wonderful retired nurse. She's in her 70s, and she's also a psychic. She's also a medium and a Reiki master. I'll pull her in if there's any types of medicines because, I'm just a psychologist. I can't really prescribe or do anything like that. I don't play with the medicines. I'm educated them, but I would rather have somebody that has, distributed them, passed them out, passed out meds to help. Just as an extra eyes, ears, and hands. But yeah, I mean, we go through all of that, all of those psychological things. But then if it isn't paranormal, then it goes into psychological counseling to help them get over, whatever trauma that they had and find out what that trauma is, and then just start using some cognitive behavioral therapy.
Do you have an estimate of the breakdown of cases that you might get involved with where it breaks down the numbers as to how many of them, or maybe a percentage of them, that turn out to be someone in need of some type of mental health counseling versus a real paranormal situation?
I feel like it's more of the mental health counseling than it is paranormal, but there are cases that are truly paranormal. And, in my case, when I started this whole process, I had very strong claims, extremely strong claims. And the team basically said, well, we all thought you were crazy until we came to the Bel Air House and we realized that, wow, this stuff really is happening to you. So, it's just being able to assess the situation ethically, properly, with respect for the family, with respect for if there are spirits there, and then just trying to do the best that we can do.
Did you have any paranormal preconceived notions before your experiences at the Bel Air House?
I did not, no.
Did you have any thoughts? I mean, was it something you were interested in prior to that?
Honestly, I didn't even know that there was things that were paranormal equipment. My first gifted paranormal piece of equipment was an old hack shack. So that kind of just shows how long I've been. But no, I thought paranormal was like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
I knew that those were on TV, but I didn't know that, there was actually paranormal television, paranormal shows. I did not know that when I was in the Bel Air House because I had my horse blinders on to continue my academic training and continue college. And, the goal was to actually have the PhD, but the Bel Air House happened. So kind of got sidetracked with that and haven't completed that part of my training yet.
And we're going to get into details about the house itself and the book, obviously, as right now we're learning a little bit more about you. And I want to go back to something that you had said with that example or that case that you were talking about. You were talking about being in the hospital, and I guess deathbed visitations is kind of the way to sum it up. Were you working with that woman in trying to help facilitate that, or were you there trying to assure her it was happening?
This is a recent case. This is one I'm still working on.
Oh, okay.
It's to assure her that, your father is transitioning. He will be leaving us, and helping her with that shock. I mean, because when we lose a family member, and you're the only child that is there, you're an older child, middle-aged child, losing your loved one, your father. I mean, that's awful. That's just it's a hard time for anybody. And, I feel very blessed that, I was able to help her through that time. But then also connecting to her father on that sense of mediumship too, because that can't be done, and giving her specific confirmations that he's weightless. He is here, and sometimes with the medium part of me, names come out that I do not know. And I believe that there was a name of a deceased loved one that had been with him that I said, I do see this person and I hear this name. And that was a major, major, major confirmation, knowing that he was at peace, but also, explaining and educating really that spirit can travel back and forth, because when we leave, when our soul, our energy leaves our physical body, our body is just a shell, but our soul goes on and our energy goes on. And I'm going to just start calling it energy from this point. And we can visit deceased loved ones. We can be there for them because, when we do transition to the afterlife, to the spirit realm, I've seen it a lot of times. Spirits, they want to check on their family. They want to make sure that their family is okay. And just educating her with that part of it did give her peace. Having that mediumship come in did give her an awful lot of peace, but she still had the grief.
Yeah.
And that was normal. That's absolutely normal. And when we have grief situations like that, she's not sleeping, she's not eating, she's feeling bad because she can't go to work, she's feeling like she can't, have a handle on it and control, letting go of that control, that vulnerability of letting go of control, that's all psychological. And someone needs to be there in order to help that person in need go over that mountain and find that balance.
When you talk about these deathbed visitations, I have a real personal interest in that because I lost both of my parents in the last few years, and my father died at home. He was sick, but it was unexpected at the time. But my mother was in the hospital for a long time, and died over the course of a few days. And while I was there with her, she was talking about people that I didn't see that she saw. And I mean, it was comforting for the most part, but she also described some what sounded to me like sinister visitors. And I can't make heads or tails of it. I've been involved in the paranormal and investigating and talking about it for 20 years or so, and then just with a casual interest prior to that. But that stuff fascinates me. What are your thoughts on that? Do deceased loved ones come to help the person who's dying, who's passing at the time, make that transition? Is there something more maybe religious about it? And what about the sinister part? What are your thoughts on all that? Okay, so if we're using an example of somebody is on their deathbed and they are a Catholic, for instance, my Aunt Rose, she did die at home. Unfortunately, she did, but she was surrounded by all of us. The whole family was there, so she was very blessed. But she did see Mother Mary. She kept saying, "Mother Mary is here." When my Uncle Joe died, he didn't see God. He didn't see Jesus. He didn't see, he didn't see our great grandmother or anything like that. But what it does is, if we're seeing that, first of all, it could be psychological because we thought that we've heard it first. We've heard it from our family. When we die, you're going to gather with your loved ones and they will come for you. So that's still there. That's still a seed planted in our head. But it does actually happen. And when it does actually happen, the energies that are coming through, the spirits that are coming through, they create that portal. And, they want to be there for the deceased loved one, but they can't, have somebody have their back when negative energy can also seep through that portal too. So, there are times where there's good spirits that can come through that would be deceased loved ones, but right behind them, because that portal, that energy has been ripped and opened, that other entities can come through too. I may have missed it in your answer, but does that mean that the process of a soul transitioning or about to transition opens that portal?
Yes, their thought process, their energy that they emit that makes that happen. And then just the simple fact that our deceased loved ones know. They know that we're coming or we're going with them or we're going to the spirit realm, whatever religious, phrase that you want to use, they know that. And I feel like they get ready for that. They do. I've seen that. I've heard it and it's not just one or two times. I've heard it a handful of times over the past 10 years. They knew. They knew that there was someone that was sick, someone that was transitioning, and they were there to help them actually use the word cross over.
Some people think that the transition process takes a considerable amount of time. I've heard of up to a year. What are your thoughts on that? Does it happen immediately for a soul or a spirit to transition from life to the other side?
I don't feel like it's instant. I do not, because I feel like there's different. I mean, it's just like us waking up, putting our feet on the floor, going to the bathroom to brush our teeth, get ready for our day. It's mostly the same. They have to go through different levels. They have to understand how to reacclimate their bodies to being weightless. That's a process. They have to understand, hey, I'm dead. I hate to use it like that, but it's the truth. No longer here. And then, with that part of it too, even in the afterlife, there's acceptance, but it's more of an acceptance based on their belief system when they actually had that, when their body was actually bound to earth by gravity and what they were told, what they believed.
You mentioned medication before, talking about that in a mental health sense. Have you ever encountered an example or an experience whereby the medication was inducing the paranormal activity? Does that ever happen? Because I know substance abuse can.
Yeah, substance abuse really, really does. It truly does. And that's one thing that I look for first. And I ask hard questions. Do you use substance drugs? Do you use street drugs? Are you an alcoholic? How much do you drink? I always ask those. But when it comes to different types of medicines, there are types of medicines for mental health issues that can make you hallucinate, can make you have visual or auditorial hallucinations. And then you have to rule that out as paranormal. Paranormal is not the case. Sometimes it is the case, even though they are hallucinating. It's just, you really have to look at each case specifically and make it a unique case and really try your best to rule out everything, because, you're helping, you are the one that is helping someone, and it's just very, very gentle situation, no matter what situation.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a lot that, I think maybe 2 years ago, there was a man that was, he said, I've been diagnosed with schizophrenia, but I'm still feeling like there's demons in my house. I'm still being attacked by demons. And that I had to refer that one because I'm not a demonologist.
Yeah.
Can't do that.
Yeah. We're talking with Kristen Lee tonight, author of the book Paranormal Confessions. Kristen, one of the things that you talk about studying is, let me see, because I want to make sure I have it right here, higher intellectual source of communication with spirits. What is a higher intellectual source of communication with spirits?
I think that good communication is higher intellect. I really do. That means they're an advanced spirit. They didn't just transition. Sometimes when people do transition, they can, talk to us as well. But the higher level of intelligence comes from what, at least at the Bel Air House, what these higher intellects wanted to be referred to as star people, which is, break it down into layman's terms, it's just aliens. So we have had communication with star people, and they have predicted some pretty heavy-hitting environmental, earth, worldly things.
These are, so again, I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but what I think I just heard you say is some of this paranormal activity that you have at the Bel Air House, the house that you own, that is an inspiration for this book that you wrote. Some of this paranormal activity relates to entities that call themselves the star people, and they actually offer you, I guess they would be prophecy of the future?
Yes, absolutely. When the star, and it's very, very rare that the star people come through in any kind of communication session that we try to collect data about at the Bel Air House. But when they do, we ask very heavy questions, like I ask, what do we need to do to preserve our Earth? What do we need to do to extend the human race? What do we need to do in order to be better humans? One time, and this is one that's in the book, we asked back in the day, it was a while ago, we asked who is going to be our next president? And the response was not the woman. Oh. So we knew at the point that we all were, had the popcorn bag watching TV the night when they announced the president. And clear enough, it wasn't the woman. It was not Hillary. It was Obama. So that was a confirmation that we had received probably, a few months before, Mr. President Obama was announced. We had asked, how do we extend life?
Okay, wait, so we're talking about when Hillary was challenging Obama for the Democrat nomination, or when Hillary was running as a general candidate against Donald Trump?
Not Trump.
So when she was in the primaries. Gotcha.
Correct. Yes. And it did say that. It said not the woman. But we also asked, what do we need to do in order to stop war, in order to be better humans? And they kept saying, and this was the same time frame, okay? They kept saying love, harmony, peace, love, harmony, peace, and music. And then look at last year. We saw everybody in Italy singing off of their balconies.
That's right. Wow. I want to talk to you about something else that you talk about. It's kind of been part of your academic approach to this, and you've studied the psychological effects on the human body while investigating. Are we talking about studying the effects of the paranormal on the human body, or the actual process of investigating?
The paranormal effects of the human body, yes. Some people get very dizzy. They sway back and forth like they're in a funhouse. We've noticed that some people, go outside. They have to kind of get themselves grounded and balanced because it's too much for them. That, when a cold chill comes through and, it's 90 degrees outside and we can't explain that, that's just different entities, spirits, energies taking energy from us to communicate, and that lowers us. That lowers our vibration. It makes us a little tired. Sometimes it makes people throw up because it's an energy overload. So, people were outside sometimes throwing up. That's rare, but it has happened. Some people feel like they're very sleepy and they go into the living room and they lay down, and before you know it, they're snoring on the couch. That's just the physiological parts of it.
It can take a lot out of you, doesn't it? It can do that.
Absolutely. But we also have to counterfact into that how long did that investigator that fell asleep on the couch, where did they drive from? How long have they been up? I mean, there's lots of questions that we kind of have in order to get the right data in order to make such a strong claim or at least begin the process of the theory.
So let's talk about the Bel Air House. Now, when I introduced it, I called it the Bel Air House. Obviously, I was emphasizing the wrong syllable there. But what was your introduction to it, and when did it come into your life?
Well, our family was affected by 2 flash floods, and the floodwaters washed our house away, completely away.
Wow.
I found the Bel Air House on a foreclosed list because, at that time in our life, we didn't have a whole bunch of, we had nothing.
Yeah.
To be quite, we had absolutely nothing. And when I found the Bel Air House on the foreclosed list, it was a decent price to where we could rebuild our lives and then slowly, build the house. So when I went into the Bel Air House, oh my gosh, it was absolutely beautiful. It was everything that I had ever dreamed of, and I thought it was a blessing. I thought, oh my gosh, we went through all of this trauma, all of this hell, and here we are at the end of the day. Here's our blessing. And then shortly after we moved in, just activity started to happen, but I didn't realize that it was activity. I blamed psychology. I blamed we're tired. Mm-hmm. I'm still in grad school. I'm working 2 jobs. Look what we just went through. This is PTSD. I just blamed everything that I possibly could because I had no knowledge of, actual negative entities doing the things that they were doing. Being a psychologist and trained psychologist, that was first in my life anyway. That was like number one. That was right on the front burner of the stove. The psychic medium stuff was all the way on the back burner of the stove, simmering on low. It's just like I did not look at the metaphysical part of it. The psychological part was first. So, I put that on the forefront for months until I couldn't do it anymore. And then finally one night there was an apparition that sat down on my couch where we were sleeping, and I actually felt the weight to where I thought it was a person that sat down. And when I sat up on my elbows and opened my eyes, to see who it wasn't a family member. It was this gray figure of a man, and you could see through him. He had no expression. He didn't say anything. And I was so startled. I was beyond startled, like startled to the power of 10. And I screamed, "Who are you? What do you want? Why are you here?" I was, petrified, absolutely petrified. And he got up. I felt the couch go up. The cushion went back up. He walked out of the living room into the foyer, and he vanished. That scared me to death.
Wow.
I was so startled. I was so scared. And then, I went to my partner, and he said, we've been through a lot. You probably had a really bad dream. You're working too hard. You're in grad school. You're working 2 jobs and a part-time, just to make all the money that we could to get back to that financial stability. He said it was just a dream. Go back to sleep. And I couldn't go back to sleep. And it was weeks before I was able to actually peacefully rest because of what I had experienced.
Did that apparition acknowledge you when it sat down and then stood up and walked off?
It looked me. It looked me right in the face. Yeah, it was face to face. Yeah, and that was such a scary. I will never, ever forget that moment. Our dog was running around, barking. You could hear her claws on the wooden floors. She was just in a panic because she knew something wasn't right. Something was there. Something was dangerous. She wanted to protect.
Did you have a sense of your psychic medium abilities prior to moving into the Bel Air House, or did that come after?
I did. I absolutely did. But I'll be honest with you, being in the Bel Air House and consuming that type of energy all of the time, it did increase the intuition to lead it to psychic abilities, and then from the psychic part of it, mediumship to being able to connect to the dead.
Do you think that harboring those sensitivities is one of the reasons you saw this apparition that night?
I don't know. And that's the best question I have with that. I really don't know. I'm still trying to unravel that after all of these years. How did that happen?
How long ago did you buy and move into the Bel Air House?
2004.
2004. So you've spent 17 years. Obviously, when you have a full bodied apparition, not just a sighting of this, but actually one that interacts with the physical world around you. In this case, it sat down on the couch. You saw the cushion, you felt the weight, and then when it left, you felt the release of that weight. That's something that's enough to send most people running out of the house and never to go back in. You chose not to. Why?
Well, because Hefe, my partner, told me it was a dream, and I believed that. I think I needed to believe that in order to function properly with my activities of daily living, of living inside of that Bel Air House.
Okay, you were told it was a dream, you accepted that, but obviously the activity didn't stop. So the next time something happened, you must have started to question whether or not, in fact, that was a dream.
Absolutely, 100% yes. There was a time where there was a great big box of tile for the floor, 50-pound, box of tile that we were laying down, and it disappeared. Well, I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of a wimp. I can't pick that up. And the kids couldn't pick it up because they were kids, They weren't, maybe my older son could have, but he swore up and down he did not do it, and I believe him. And Lane at that time was a baby. He's going to be 19 pretty soon. He couldn't have done it. But Hefe, I didn't believe him. I believed that maybe he drank too much and he put it somewhere, and, it caused major fights. We were fighting with each other. Things that would come up missing, it was almost like, and it wasn't almost like it was, the entities inside of the Bel Air House were actually pitting us against each other to start these fights, to lower our energy, to lower our vibe, to separate and divide, so they could eventually conquer and divide our family. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. So time goes on, you're experiencing these things in the home. At what point did you, as you described earlier in our conversation, you kind of turned your attention away from your academics and your PhD and focused more on the paranormal? Was there a specific event that made you do that, or was just the sum of everything that was going on?
There's a specific event, but I haven't finished my PhD yet. I want to make that clear so, nobody gets confused. The time that everybody left the house, it was very close to fall time frame, and everybody left the house to go and, go out and celebrate and have fun. And this wasn't my family. At this point, my family had left, and it was just my dog and myself. My son, my little son was there. The baby was there. But he was staying with his grandparents that night. And I actually saw, this is awful. So I normally don't talk about this, but what did it was seeing my dog legitimately picked up and thrown against the wall while I was onto a bed. I could not move. There was an entity that looked like a 3-foot static electricity rain cloud that was just hovering over to where I was. I could not move at all. I wasn't completely asleep, but I was laying down trying to go to sleep. And this was in the back bedroom, which is now called the Edwin Hetherington room. And all I could do was move my eyes back and forth and pray to St. Michael because I thought I was going to die that night. And our dog Bella had jumped on top of me. I could feel her claws going into my collarbone. She was such in a panic. Her saliva was coming down on my face. She wasn't trying to attack me. She was trying to protect me. But whatever this entity was, she was lifted up and slammed against the wall, the actual wall. And you heard the yelp, the scream that she made was, that was the worst thing I've ever heard in my life, ever. And that was such a traumatic experience. Still today, I struggle with that. When there's times where it just, that thought comes through, you kind of have to redirect that thought. You have to kind of recondition that thought process a lot. It's like when people say, well, just recondition your thought processes. That is a practice that is for life. You just don't recondition it and it goes away. It's definitely a practice.
And again, you have this experience which can be described as nothing but frightening, and you still decide to stay there. Now, did that, after you had a chance to recover from the actual event, did you become curious? Did you say you wanted to get to the bottom of this? What was the motivator not to, again, go running, screaming out of the house, never to look back?
That's what I did. That's exactly what I did. When everybody, when I picked Bella up off the floor, I had put her in my Jeep, and that was a chore because she wasn't a puppy. She was a big girl. We left the house that night, and the next day, a very good friend of mine, when I turned my phone back on, said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm at the reservoir with Bella. She's I think her leg is broken." So he met me there, and he helped me get her back into the Jeep. We immediately got her medical care, and she sprained her leg. She didn't break it, but she had a limp for the rest of her life. But I told him, I said, I'm not going back in that house. So I ended up getting a hotel room. The next day, I went and picked up my son, and we stayed in the hotel room. And then I started to pray and petition that somebody, and this is me being stupid, but I was because I was scared to death. I prayed that somebody would just come and rent the house. And sure enough, there was a contractor that was fixing roofs at the time because we had major hailstorms. He came and he said, "How much can we rent your house for? We have a 10-crew roofing crew that needs a big house like this. When can you be out?" And I said, "We'll be out. When do you need us out?" He said, "Tomorrow." So we had 2 days to pack, just some of the things that we needed, find housing, which I thank God I did. I moved from the great big Bel Air House to a little rinky-dink townhouse in 2 towns away, and that's where I started to unravel what the heck just happened to me, what happened to my family, and what happened to our dog. What happened? So then I started to Google paranormal investigators. Just did a Google search, Belmont County paranormal investigators. There's nothing. Ohio County, which is Wheeling, West Virginia, paranormal investigators, nothing. Then I just put in Ohio paranormal investigators, and then paranormal investigation researchers showed up. I called them immediately. They answered the phone. It was like the grace of God. They just answered the phone, and I explained to them what was happening, and I could hear the reservation in their voice. I thought 100%. I thought I was crazy. And I knew they thought I was crazy. And then later on, down the line after, they investigated the house. They're like, Kristen, you had some really strong claims. We really, really thought you were mentally ill. And I'm like, yeah, I do too. So, what's going on? And then the coolest thing with this team is they held my hand. They made me go back in the house, and they started to train me as a paranormal investigator because their hopes were that the house wasn't as bad as what it was and that we could actually reacclimate ourselves into the house with appeasing the spirits and learning paranormal investigation techniques and how to communicate with, malevolent and negative entities. But that didn't work. And I just did not feel comfortable. So I did let the house go. And I ended up in a federal court system saying, you can have the house. I don't want the house. And we packed up and we moved to Massachusetts for a little bit. And I mean a little bit because at that point in time, the code enforcer named Jim Chase, who's no longer with us, he called and said that I needed to come back to Bel Air to cut the grass. And I told Mr. Chase, I said, I don't own the house anymore. I'm not responsible for it. And he says, you are responsible for it. He said, Belmont County auditor didn't want your house. The mortgage company didn't want your house. But we certainly, as the village of Bel Air, don't want your house. So even though you filed bankruptcy on their house, you're still responsible for its maintenance. So I had to leave. Had to leave Massachusetts, and then I got stuck here in Bel Air ever since then. And then we started to operate the Bel Air House the way that it is. The first round of operating the Bel Air House, there was a man that was in Bel Air. His name's Jim Johnston, and he said, "Listen, you have a book because I wrote a book. It's called 1699 Belmont Street. It's an awful book. Please don't read it because it was a crisis book. You know what I mean? It was like Kermit the Frog when you see him online, like you're scrolling through social media and he's like rantingly like typing at the typewriter as fast as he can. That's what that book is to me. But a lot of people like it. It sold a lot of copies, but I don't like that book because it's raw. I mean, it is raw truth in that book, and it's 12, 13 years ago, and I've grown a lot since then, but so I wrote this book for the next homeowners of the family because I wanted to give them a heads up and I wanted to give them some referrals on who they could call in case, the house became the Bel Air House again. But, Jim Johnston said, you wrote a book, you and Mike were on TV. He said, build revenue for Bel Air. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. And he actually put his name on the Bel Air House deed. And he owned owned half of the Bel Air House, and he did operate it as a tourist attraction, and just did tours. I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know that people came to haunted locations to set up their gear and investigate and spend the night. Right. And I didn't know the companies that traveled around, the world with groups to do investigations. I didn't know any of that stuff. All I knew was I wanted nothing to do with that house. I just wanted to live on Easy Street and bake cupcakes and, watch the Golden Girls. I didn't have anything to do with that. But, there was a time where I kept telling him somebody's going to get hurt. And Mike McAllister, who was with OVPRI, kept telling him, Mr. Johnston, this is not a fun house. This is not a Halloween house where Jason Voorhees is going to jump out of the closet with a chainsaw. It's not like that. This is a legitimate paranormal location. And he didn't believe it. He did not believe in spirits. Even though he was a Mormon, he didn't believe in any of that. So one day, one of our groundskeepers ended up going through the second-story window. He was pushed down the steps, and he went through the second-story window. And at that point in time, I told Jim, I said, you need to pull the plug. Somebody's going to get hurt. This is a liability. And if somebody dies, that's going to be on you because I told you. And then he finally closed it. And then he started to rent the house out to different renters. They didn't stay long. I think the most that a renter ever stayed was when Jim was out of the picture. They stayed for almost a year. And then that was the last set of renters that ever lived in the Bel Air House. And then I turned it in. When I ended up getting married to my husband, Jim Johnston said, take my name off the deed. You're married now. You and your husband deal with this. And I was like, thanks. That's the worst wedding present you could ever give anybody. But, he thought it would be cool, but it wasn't. So we had to do what we had to do. We rented it out. We told people, listen, and we know you've seen it on TV. We're not trying to suggest anything. We're not going to hold you to a lease. If something happens and you want to leave, we get it. We understand. But, this is what happened to us. But they didn't believe in the paranormal. The last set of renters didn't believe. And they didn't believe until they could not believe anymore. And then they finally called and they said, we're packed up, we're leaving. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, I thought we were thought you were going to live here forever. And that just didn't happen. So we went down, and when we met the last renter, he said, I was walking through the kitchen, going to the bathroom, and the chandelier came a half an inch from hitting me on my head. It actually came out of the ceiling. He said, there's some very strange things that have happened here. When he came up to our place to pay rent one time, he had informed me that there was a secret room in the basement that he believed was the Underground Railroad. He went to the public library to do research, and he found proof that the Bel Air House was a stop for the Underground Railroad. So I had no idea of that part of its history. None.
And you didn't know that room was in the basement? You never saw it?
Nope, never saw it. It was behind the furnace. Never, ever saw it. I didn't spend a lot of time in the basement,
Right.
But he did. Evidently he did. But yeah, he was able to, give us an idea that the Bel Air House was part of the Underground Railroad. But I left it at that because I still was skeptical of things. I still to that day I was, even though I'd seen everything and heard everything. I think skepticism is I don't want to believe, therefore it didn't happen, because it's a sense of having to conform to a different thought process, a different way than what I was brought up. The way that other people were brought up. We're not brought up to believe that we can communicate with the dead and things can be thrown across the room. That's not the way that our culture is, a typical culture. But that's what happened with that part of it. And then, when we turned it into the Afterlife Research Center, that's when I really started to dive in to the history to understand better why the things are occurring inside of the Bel Air House. And, of course, we did find documentation that there were servants, and it said it on their census records. And through data collections, they asked us to call them servants. They said they did not want to be called slaves because they were not slaves. They said that they had their freedom. They said they were in a free state, and they were not slaves. So we, respectfully called them servants from that foot forward. And it does turn out that the Bel Air House is part of the Underground Railroad.
Wow. So just quickly, the first group of investigators that came in after you called them, and they concluded that, they basically confirmed that the things you had experienced were legitimate. Did they give you any warnings? Did they say this is something you shouldn't mess with? Because most paranormal investigators won't do that. I'm just curious what their impression was when they were done investigating.
Mike McAllister kept saying, I'm calling Bishop. I heard this Bishop name probably 100 times. And when activity would get off the chain, is how he called it, he said, I'm calling Bishop James Long. And Bishop James Long is an exorcist. He's a demonologist, and he's with the Old Catholic Church. I never knew Bishop. I never knew him. I just knew that there was a man out there that could fix the house. That's how I thought. And Mike, Mike's like, you guys can't live here. He's like, there's nothing that we can do. And, fortunately, by the grace of God, I was able to move. I was able to get out of there. It was a struggle. It was definitely a struggle. And there were times, when activity was so large that my son and my dog, we slept in our Jeep. That we had to. I mean, we were broke a couple of points to where we couldn't get a hotel room. And it was, 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't want to go knock on my mom's door and wake her up and have her up all night, So we just did, what we could do. But, yeah, Mike, I think that, and I will say this for the record, Mike McAllister, Amanda McAllister, Danny Fong, Kentucky Ghost Scouts, Eyes of Paranormal, they were all very, very ethical people. And thank God I was trained by ethical people, because I'm going to tell you something. I've seen, anywhere from 6 to 8, enthusiasts, investigators that roll through the Bel Air House weekly, okay, all year long. And some of them are great ethical people, but some of them are thrill seekers, and they want those types of experiences so they can put it on a video and possibly get a TV show.
Yeah.
And that's not what you want in a residential case. You don't want somebody thirsty for fame and television coming into your home, because that comes into exploitation. But no, they did tell me to get the heck out of there. You can't deal with this. We're going to try to get a hold of Bishop. Well, finally, one day, the sun came out behind the clouds, and Bishop James Long actually came to the house. And I finally got to meet him. And ever since that day happened, he's kind of taken me under his wing, and he's taught me a lot. And a lot of paranormal investigators that come into the Bel Air House, they have taught me so much. I mean, I have hands-on, firsthand experience from thousands and thousands of paranormal investigators.
Did the bishop, I think you said, was it James Long? Is that what you said? Is that the name? Yeah. Did he exercise the house? Did he cleanse it? I mean, because obviously at some point you felt it went from being menacing and maybe even dangerous, as you relate a couple of experiences to us that were in fact dangerous, to a point where you're comfortable letting other people go through the house and investigate. Did something change? Did he do something?
Well, yes, he did do blessings. He did do cleansings. He did not do a minor rite. He did not. Not at that time, not at that point in time. But he did cleansings, he did blessings, and he educated me on how to handle it, how to handle that type of energy. And I also put in Sigiriya, which is Italian witchcraft. That was back in the day. And I utilized some of those practices as well in order to kind of get the house more in a balance, to where people could actually come in. But when the cleansing and the blessing was done, with a mixture of other different components of religion, the house did settle down. It did become that those negative entities did become dormant, but they didn't last dormant for long. A couple years would go by, they'd pop back up, and, we'd have to make a couple phone calls. Guys, the house is cranky again. Can we all get in here and kind of calm it down, and then leave it sit for a couple of days? We do have to do that on a routine basis. We just can't predict when. You know what I mean? It's just, it happens when it happens, and then we're proactive when it happens.
Have you yourself or any of the folks that have come through the house to investigate, whether it's people that you brought in or people that do it because they're interested in what the house is about, what kind of evidence or pictures or video or audio have you or any of them gotten? Is it stuff that you can share with us? Tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, the one that's most recent that comes to mind is we just launched on Unsolved Mysteries podcast September 1st. And there were two women that regularly come to the Bel Air House to investigate, to collect data. One is a hospice nurse, and one is a nurse that delivers babies. So we've got one bringing them in and one taking them out. And I'm going to tell you something. These two women are very, very gifted. So when they come in, I always want to spend time with them to see what kind of data that they collect. On this podcast, they actually played the clip that they caught that night. So we hung a chain on the chandelier in the seance room just to see if, like a pendulum, if a spirit would be able to make that chain move back and forth, right? So using audio only and a REM pod, for sensory and stuff like that, sensory motion, the REM pod did go off. But then when we listened back to the audio, there was a full-fledged conversation of two men that were talking back and forth to each other for probably a minute. And we are literally fell on the table. They dropped on the table. We're like, what the heck is that? How did that happen? But we had to listen to the audio. We didn't hear it with our ears while it was happening, but it was recorded and it was picked up while we were recording the audio of just trying to make that chain go back and forth. And you can hear the chain go back and forth. And then a few minutes later, there's these two men talking back and forth. Now, what's interesting about that is when the nurses came back, when we opened up right after COVID, they were the first ones in. And they called me and they kept saying, Dave is talking to us. Dave, Dave, Dave. And I'm thinking it's an investigator named Dave that always comes to the house. Maybe the house wants to see Dave again. So I went down and we did some communication sessions. I think we did like 6 hours worth of communication sessions. And it just kept saying Dave. And then finally we discovered that this man who was talking to us was not named Dave. His name was Nagari, and he was looking for Dave. So he said, murder, murder, murder. So, and then he said a little store's name that was in West Bel Air at the time. It's called Frizzy's. So the investigator, Nicole, looked up murder, Bel Air, West Bel Air, Frizzy's, Dave. And sure enough, it popped up. The whole case popped up. So when she started to question the spirit, she said, so Dave shot you. And clearly through the equipment, it said, you're reading it, you tell me. Wow. So the spirit knew that Nicole was reading the article. And then finally, Nicole lost it. She lost it. She said, guess what today is? All of us said what the date was. I don't remember what the date was, but it was the date that the man that murdered him was sentenced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the clock here. We're going to run out of time. I want to turn attention directly to the book here. When did you decide to write about all of this?
Well, I've been trying to write that book for 10 years. But one day, our world was shut down, and I said, it's the best time to write this book now. So, I sat in my office for months writing and writing and writing and throwing stuff away and deleting and burning and writing. And finally, I came up with Paranormal Confessions. I just chose the 13 best, quote unquote ghost stories, but real authentic paranormal stories that were most profound to me while I was there in the Bel Air House.
Yeah, I mean, on the cover it says true stories of hauntings, possession, and horror from the Bel Air House. Do you still consider some of those experiences, now that maybe you understand them a little better, to be horrific?
I think they're very profound. I think some of them are terrifying and horrific. Absolutely. The chapter Conquer and Divide was absolutely horrific. It truly, truly was. It was an awful experience, but my signature is negative, 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 negative. And then let's end it with a very positive story. Like through the darkness, there is always light. But then I'm hearing reviews that the last, one of the last chapters where I'm trying to make it positive, they say that's the creepiest one in the whole book. So that didn't work for me very well.
When someone reads the book, in addition to obviously being fascinated by the events that have taken place in the house, what else do you want them to walk away from with the book from?
Tips. There's tips at the end of every chapter for anybody. Tips that can help you whether you're preparing to go to an investigation, tips to help you, maintain your high frequency vibration so you're not feeling lethargic, you're not feeling sick, those types of things. There's protective tools in there. I did write tips on hyacinth oil, and you can even anoint deceased loved ones with hyacinth oil before they're, buried or cremated, stuff like that. Gosh, there's lots. There's lots of different tips in there for sure. And how to cleanse your home. The best practice is to cleanse your home. Even if your home isn't haunted, it's still very good to have that practice of, how you mop your floors, how you run the vacuum. You need to do this too for your home, for the spiritual sense of that side of life.
You mentioned the Divide and Conquer chapter, which is chapter 11, and but some of the other titles here are also equally shiver-inducing. Footsteps in the Attic, Crossing Over, What Lies Below, and more. Was Divide and Conquer, if you had to pick a favorite chapter of yours, is that the one, or is one of the others?
I can't remember what I titled it, but it was about a spirit that actually showed up at my front door of my apartment in the flesh. His name was Gary. And that was what I wanted to be the positive story. But unfortunately, it didn't, a lot of the readers, I'm getting a lot of feedback that it wasn't, that story actually scared them more than anything.
Oh, wow.
Because now they know that, spirit can manifest. It absolutely 100% can manifest in real life. And I've never seen that since. My son saw it too. My husband saw it too. There was this man. Let me try to shorten it up because I know we're running out of time. But we did an investigation on a super full blue blood moon. It was New Year's Eve, right? We made communication with a spirit named Gary, and Gary lived in the cubbyhole with two other spirits, and they said that, they didn't want to leave the Bel Air House. They couldn't leave the Bel Air House. They couldn't leave that cubbyhole because there was an evil entity there. And he told us his name was Gary. He was from Florida. His last name was Hetherington. I didn't know any Garys in the Hetherington family line. Later on down the line, I learned that servants took the last name of the owners of the home, which would have made Gary a slave or a servant. We still aren't sure which one he is because we didn't ask that. We just didn't know. Then, I did the worst thing any paranormal investigator could do because I got very, very emotional when he said that his son, his 4-year-old son, went to the gable in the attic and this evil entity lured him to the gable and he plunged to his death. And his wife died in the house somewhere. His wife's spirit was still somewhere in the house. So I was so sad. Like, I legitimately had tears coming out of my eyes. And at that point, you got to walk away. Like, if you get emotional like that, please, anybody, walk away. Take a break. You have to go in with a very strong head and a very scientific mind if you can. But I told Gary the worst thing. I said, Gary, you don't have to stay here. You can go sleep in bed. You can go eat food off the table. You can come with me. And when I said that, fellow investigator Mike Simpson, very, very respected investigator of mine, he said, Kristen Lee, you need to leave your house. And I said, Mike Simpson, you're absolutely right. And I listened, and thank God I did. So I left for a little bit. And then the night went on, and everybody was happy, and everybody was high-fiving because all this paranormal activity was happening. But months later, my doorbell rings at my apartment, which is 2 towns away from the Bel Air House. And this man, I open the door and I see this man, and he's like, I'd like to inquire about the apartment below you, but I can't get a hold of the man that owns the building. And I got my phone, and I said, let me shoot him a text. What's your name? And he said, Gary. I said, okay, Gary, what's your phone number? He gave me his phone number. I text Laney, and Laney's the landlord. And he said, I didn't mean to bother you, but my wife's next door at the doctor. I live right next to a gynecologist, baby doctor, Dr. Sarah, and she was over there because she was 4 months pregnant. So my son came home from school, and I needed to rush into bowling practice, and we opened the door, and there's Gary again with his wife. And I said, what are you guys doing? What's going on? He said, we're here to see the apartment. I said, well, let me walk you around back. So I walked him around back, and we were talking, and I said, it would be so cool if you guys move in. I'm so excited. I love babies, because I do. Oh, my God, I love babies so much. And I said, it would be great to have a barbecue. It would be great, have a baby. He put his hand on my shoulder. He walked up to me, like in my personal space. He put his hand gently on my shoulder, and he said, Kristen Lee, I never told him my name. He said, our family is eternally grateful for what you've done for us. And I didn't think of anything. I said, no worries, man. It's cool. It's good. Well, I'll see you guys later. Can't wait till you move in. Got in the Jeep, taking my son to bowling practice, and it hit me. I said, oh, my God, that's Gary from the Bel Air House. It's him. And in my mind, I can hear I'm like in a trance. Like, I'm so, concentrated. I had to pull over. I had to collect myself, and I can hear my son, Mom, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. And then finally I collect myself, and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to drop my son off. I pull up this number. I'm going to pull up this number. If this number is a Florida Exchange area code number, I'm going to lose it. I'm just going to lose it. I dropped him off. I pulled it up. It was a Florida Exchange phone number. And it's just the feeling that head to toe confirmation, physiological feeling of confirmation, that was not psychological. That was paranormal. And that has never happened since, but that was the biggest paranormal experience that I'll never, ever be able to explain that.
Did you ever see Gary again?
Never saw him again. He never moved in, nothing.
Wow.
Now, Laney did talk to him. Because I went to, Laney did talk to us. I know it was legit. I knew it was real. I don't believe in coincidences. I do not believe that was a coincidence at all. I think that was Gary letting us know that, hey, we made it out. Hey, we're in this different loop now. We're in this different dimension now. We slipped into, I know this is going to sound crazy, but it's true. We slipped into your dimension. We came here to let you know, thank you. We're eternally grateful. We got out.
Wow. Well, we're out of time, Kristen. The book is called Paranormal Confessions. Where can people find it, and where can they follow your work a little more closely?
Well, if you just do a Google search, Paranormal Confessions, Kristen Lee, we are on all platforms. I even have the book on an audiobook right now. In case you have long commutes, you can just listen to it. That's there. But to find us, to find the Bel Air House, to come and spend time at the Bel Air House, to meet the spirits of the Bel Air House, just find us on belairhousetours.com.
I have to ask you one more question before I let you go, though. As a psychic medium, when we have a nationally high-profile case like this Gabby Petito case that's just unfolding in front of our eyes right now, what are your thoughts on psychics and mediums kind of trying to use those sensitivities to figure out what happened in a case like that? Did you do that yourself, or do you have any thoughts about that?
Is that like a crime case, like a murder case? I'm not familiar with
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I figured you would know. It's the 22-year-old girl who she and her boyfriend were driving across the country. He ends up home with her car without her, avoiding police. The parents, a week later, report the girl missing, and they just found her body.
Oh, God. I'm so sorry to hear that. I can't. I can't do things like that. Because I feel like I've got great friends that can, and I lean on them to do things like that if anybody ever needs that kind of referral. But for me, that just breaks my heart. It really does.
Yeah.
And I don't allow myself to be submitted to things like that. Now, I'll tune in and dive into the spirit realm and swim around until I find a deceased loved one. Absolutely, 100%. I'll do that till the cows come home. But when it comes to like murder cases and stuff like that, I'm very, very, very sensitive, and that would just rock my whole vibe. I can't do that.
Yeah, I can see how that would. I was just curious about that. Well, Kristen, thanks so much for your time tonight. The book is fantastic. The stories are amazing, and the house is unbelievably active. So anybody who's paranormally curious, this is a great read. And your website also has some information about the home too, as well. So thanks so much for being here tonight. Look forward to having you back sometime.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. If you're ever in town, let me know.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick... Oh, you know what? I should just ask one more thing here. What town in Ohio is the house in?
Bel Air, Ohio.
Oh, it is in Bel Air. Okay, perfect. Awesome. All right, thanks, Kristen. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, once again, the book is called Paranormal Confessions. The author is Kristen Lee, our guest tonight, and you can find the book pretty much anywhere books are sold. I know it's on Amazon, and you can go to the website. The website is belairhousetours.com, and there's a lot of information there as well. I think there's a link to the book, too. So I brought up, before we close the interview with Kristen, this Gabby Petito case. I did want to spend a few minutes kind of looking at it. I don't know what you guys think about this. True crime is something that I've always been fascinated by. As someone who watches a ton of forensic files and every true crime documentary that's on of any weight. And they all fascinate me, and it's a morbid curiosity, of course. But it's also interesting just to try to understand how people behave the way they behave. And right now we've got that unfolding. You've got a young couple that drives across the country, starting in Long Island, New York. And they take Gabby's van, the girl's van, and it's kind of I don't know if it's a camper van or it's just a van that holds their tent. I'm not really sure. But they use it as basically their base. They're camping and living out of the van. I don't know how long they were gone for. I think in total it was about a month. But I think that For the first 3 or 4 weeks, things seem to be okay from her parents' perspective, and then all of a sudden they stop hearing from her. They get a bizarre text that they don't think came from her, although it came from her phone. And then the next thing you know, they don't hear from her. And on September 11th of all days, the parents, Gabby's parents, report her missing because they can't get a hold of her. They haven't been able to for days. And they also find out that her boyfriend, who was traveling with her, had returned home to Florida with her vehicle, with her van, on September 1st. Now, there is some question whether or not he actually ever was there, because he's not there now. So the whole thing is just it's a bizarre and disturbing case all the way around. They did determine that her death was a homicide. That has been determined. I don't want to hear that. That's been determined. They found a body which they were fairly certain was hers. They found it, was it 2 days ago, I think? And they did the autopsy today. Forgive me, this is going to be a little informal as we do this because I'm trying to get screen grabs or some type of ability to show these as I'm talking about them, these articles. So forgive the casual nature of this. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, so let me get this the best I can. So, all right, so this article, Gabby Petito's death determined to be homicide. She was found dead near the Grand Teton National Park on Sunday. Missing for several weeks. It's been found to be a homicide. I don't think they've determined what the manner of death was or the cause. I'd always get confused. Is manner the one where they say it's homicide, or is cause the one they say is homicide? And manner would be like, strangulation or whatever it happens to be. Well, I guess this answers it right here. It says the cause of her death remains pending final autopsy results. So the manner of death is homicide, and the cause is yet to be determined. But in a tweet, which I find funny, they announced this stuff through Twitter now, but the FBI in Denver said Teton County Coroner Dr. Brent Blue confirmed the remains are those of Gabrielle Petito, date of birth March 19th, 1999. Coroner Blue's initial determination for the manner of death is homicide. The cause of death remains pending final autopsy results. They found the body on Sunday, so it was 2 days ago, and obviously there were tattoos and stuff. They probably identified her unofficially right away. But they, as this points out, Petito's disappearance made national headlines earlier this month after her fiance, 23-year-old Brian Laundrie. Now, he's 23 years old and he's already bald. Not that I'm fixated on that, but I thought he was older. 23-year-old Brian Laundrie returned to Florida. It says in his van, I think it was her van, alone after going on a cross-country road trip with Petito. Social media posts showed the couple traveling across multiple states, snapping selfies of themselves along the way. The thing about the selfies is that they seem to be happy. In the things they were posting, there's a lot of smiles and little kissing and whatever. They seem to be happy. There was a revelation here. Some body camera footage was released by Utah's Moab Police Department last week, which showed that the couple had been in a fight on August 12th as they were traveling through Arches National Park. In the footage, Petito told officers the two had been fighting that morning and she'd slapped him. Police separated the two for the night and characterized the incident in their report as a mental emotional break. So looking at the timeline here, after his initial return to Florida, on September 1st, Laundrie went missing, is now being sought by authorities. The FBI confirmed it was executing a court-authorized search warrant related to the disappearance of Petito at the Laundrie's home. They did that yesterday, and authorities are still combing Sarasota County, Florida, for the missing man. And here's the other thing is that Northport, which is the town in Florida, police spokesman Josh Taylor told CNN, we've been trying all week to talk to his family, to talk to Brian, and they're saying now they haven't seen their son, so are working through those details. It's another twist in the story. Obviously, the parents are covering up for him. I'm curious. Some people think that this 23-year-old man who's responsible for the death of, well, most likely responsible for the death of Gabby Petito, the 22-year-old girl, that he went off somewhere and killed himself. Others think that he actually never came home to Florida, that's all a ruse, and they're just trying to throw police off while he, gets out of the country or whatever. Then there's some clues to indicate that, especially, specifically, I've got a hair here, specifically what his sister said, that she hadn't spoken to him, so that was kind of weird. What do you think? I'm going to watch chat here. What do you think? Do you think that he is hiding out somewhere? Maybe at a relative's house, or do you think he went into whatever that state park was that he went, quote unquote, hiking in and committed suicide? I mean, that's a possibility. Or do you think he never even came back to Florida, and maybe his parents met him somewhere and brought the van back while he took off? Maybe they met him at an airport and he flew out of the country, although they would be able to get that information. You can't get on an airplane under an alias very easily. Okay, so reading chat here. What do we have here? I'm just trying to catch up a little bit. People who say a story like this distracts us from bigger things fail to realize that knowing about those bigger things won't change them. There's a reason people become fixated on stories like this. They're obviously very, very tragic, but it tells you a little bit about human nature as well. Sometimes I find myself struggling with that. They can be time-consuming, and you can become obsessed with it, and you think to yourself, why am I engaged in such a morbid activity here in obsessing with this? But that's not really what it is. It's trying to understand human behavior and how understand how this 23-year-old boy could, if assuming that everything that appears to have happened has happened, how could somebody do that? And how could the parents be hiding him? How could the parents completely disregard the parents of Gabby Petito and not understand how important it is for them to have answers? So there was something here I wanted to comment on. Look up the deer clip. It was released today. Okay, so breaking saying that that he was spotted on a trail cam. Let me see if I can find that, because that would be interesting. Got to be able to spell first. Let's see here. Oh, okay, so let me see. Let me. So here's. Do we have it here? There's the picture. A trail cam has captured footage of a man matching the description of Gabby Petito's fiance. What is this? I don't know even know what website this is. Authorities in Florida are still searching for Gabby Petito's fiance, Brian Laundrie, who went for a hike one day and never returned. However, one man reckons he's captured Laundrie on footage. I mean, it looks kind of like him. Earlier today, we know that. In a rather interesting turn, Florida man Sam Bass has posted this image to his Facebook, which was captured by his deer camera, positioned by a forest trail. In the picture is a man resembling Brian Laundrie trekking through the forest at 6:17 a.m. in Baker, Florida. This location is approximately 800 kilometers away from Laundrie's home. He's carrying what looks to be like a travel bag or a backpack of some kind. I mean, but where would he be going? If you're running away from the police, you don't just wander aimlessly. It's not like you don't just run with no objective, no direction. You got to hide. I mean, not that I'm giving him advice or that I think he should be doing this. But if he was there, he's got to have a destination. He's not going to just run around the woods. Let me see. What does it say? I'm not saying this is the guy, but whoever was on my trail camera this morning in Baker, Florida, strongly fits the description of Brian Laundrie. Authorities have been contacted, but people in the Northwest Florida area be on the lookout. A spokeswoman for, Florida names are crazy. Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office told the New York Times that the police are remaining vigilant and investigated the footage captured by Sam Bass. I can't blow it up here. Let me see if I can. All right, let me see if I can get this so we can see it better. This is all live. You're watching me do this all on the fly. Don't normally do this way, but where is it? Okay. All right, so let's see if we can get a better look at this. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so now here, let's see, is that better? Here's the picture. Looks to me like maybe he's shaven. See, that's... I mean, what's a guy walking around in somebody's property with a travel bag like that at 6:17 in the morning? I mean, doesn't look like he's hunting. And I'm not sure. It doesn't really say here what the type of property this is, or it's a deer cam, but it doesn't say how much property it is, if it's in the middle of 100 acres or it's in the middle of 2 acres. Who knows? We don't know the answer to that. So, let's see, going back to chat here. If he's not dead, if not hiding quite well. But, Nikki, he could just be held up in somebody's house, a friend or another relative, maybe an uncle or an aunt or something, and they just have him in the basement. I would assume that the police have checked with all of his relatives. I don't know. But if you hide out in somebody's house and it's somebody that the police wouldn't think of checking with right away anyway, you could stay there for quite some time. Eventually you got to come out, I suppose. And if this is actually footage of him or a picture of him walking through the area, that says he's out and about. So I don't know. Let's see. What else? Deer cam. Was the deer cam clip a clip or was it just a picture? Because I only saw the still. I didn't see one where we had an option to view a video. Brings our morality. Yeah, it does, breaking. That's the thing. It brings our morality into mine, and it focuses or opens up a conversation or a thought process about the darker aspects of human nature. That's absolutely right. Wish I could understand. Gene says, I wish I could understand this woman who I dealt with. Oh, that's about something different else, I suppose, Gene. Nikki said, boom, correct, JV. I'm not sure what point you think I was correct about. I mean, I'm just doing a lot of speculating here at this point. What do you think, Sam? Oh, you know what? Let me put the picture back up. I didn't even notice. I mean, I don't know. He could have changed his clothes 5 times by now. How long has he been on the run? That's the other thing. They said he was in the house when the police first started trying to find him, but he didn't. Maybe he wasn't. Nobody knows. That's the thing. He could have been. He could have been on the run since August 28th or whatever. Let's see here. The backpack matches. What is the backpack match? Have we seen an image of a backpack that he has? So I haven't seen that one. If that's the case, here's there's the parents being put into the van as they search the house. I thought they had arrested the parents, but they didn't. I guess that's his mom and the dad getting in on the other side as the FBI swarmed the house. They took a lot of stuff out of there. Let me see. What does this say here? There'll be no press con. Okay. They're calling the house an active crime scene. So they must think something, there's something in there of interest that will help them figure out either what happened to Gabby or where Laundrie went. Parents of Brian Laundrie arrived back at their home. That's when they went back in. I want to find. Does anybody know what the tweets were, or not the tweets? I've gotten in the habit of saying tweet instead of text. Does anybody know what the texts were that Laundrie or somebody sent that Gabby's parents say weren't Gabby? Does anybody know what those were? I've been looking for those. And of course, then there are the reports of the 911 call that was made that indicated that he was hitting her. And that could have been the start of the whole thing. Who knows? And there's a lot of criticism of the police, but the police, when they go to a situation like that, especially two kids, the last thing they want to do is put them in jail. So they have to assess the situation. She said that she hit him. That's what she said. And, I think that they separated them for the night, figuring it was just a stupid argument and things would be fine. Obviously, in retrospect, it was wrong, but, I don't blame the police. I think they're trying to just make it work for everybody. Let's see, what else? Gator Man will get him? Yeah. It's the same kind of backpack as one in their Instagram videos. Oh, okay. Okay. I wonder if he's been honest with any family helping and they believe him despite the reports because it's their family. I'll tell you what, if the family believes, if the family believes him, if he told them that he didn't do it and he just ran, you got to have some kind of story, be some kind of liar, and have some kind of gullible parents to believe that. Look at the circumstances of this. You couldn't, if you wrote a checklist of things to do to make yourself look guilty, he's hit every one of them. The only possible explanation, and that was before they found the body, was that maybe there was an accident and he panicked, didn't know what to do. He's 23 years old, for God's sakes. But even that, after a while, a couple days goes by, or your parents say, listen, if it was an accident, you got to tell police what happened, you have to. But you don't say that if you're guilty of murder, do you? Let's see here. Oh, it was a text to the grandfather calling him Stan, which she never called him Stan. Stan, can you help? I'm only getting... Yeah, it was wasn't it something about the fact that Stan or the grandfather was trying to get a hold of her or whatever, and so she sent a text to her mom or something saying, Stan's been trying to get a hold of me. Can you tell him, get in touch with him for me, or something like that, right? Breaking, you probably know better than me, because I just knew there was a text. I didn't know what it was. I guess there's nothing new here to talk about other than what we've already chatted about. So it's interesting to see what people think, though. And I would imagine that he's going to turn up the next day or two. If he's on the run, he's not going to be able to hide unless he's gotten out of the country. Scooter, what are you talking about? Scooter, you're having a completely different conversation. Are you having it with yourself, or is it with somebody else? I'm going to give you one trivia question. We went extra talking about this Gabby Petito case. I'm going to give you one trivia question just so we can end it on a happy note, or a happier note anyway. Here we go. Ready? What is the name of a hit musical about a group of washed-up Broadway stars who come to help a girl who wants to bring her girlfriend to a dance at her conservative school in small town Indiana. What is the name of a hit musical about a group of washed-up Broadway stars who come to help a girl who wants to bring her girlfriend to a dance at her conservative school in small town Indiana? Well, only one comes to mind, and it's a movie that was a pretty big hit, or I guess I've never seen it, though. To me, it just didn't appeal to me. But given the... I don't know. Maybe there's a newer one it's a different one. I don't know. Yeah, Nikki, it's all very, very sad. It's all very, very sad, which is why we're, kind of fixated on it. Yeah, Scooter, I was thinking it was Footloose too. He just got back. Who just got back? Oh, Scooter just got back? I was thinking it was Footloose, Scooter. But I thought Footloose was not about a group of Broadway stars that wanted to help a girl go to a dance with a girlfriend. I thought Footloose, and again, I've never seen it, but I thought it was about a place that didn't allow dancing, and they were trying to change the town leaders to allow dancing. I mean, there's dancing is the common thread there, I suppose, but I don't know. Not Hairspray? Once again, question is, what is the name of a hit musical about a group of washed-up Broadway stars who come to help a girl who wants to bring her girlfriend to a dance at her conservative school in small-town Indiana? Yeah, that's what I thought, Iowa. Okay, yeah, it's not Footloose. I don't think anybody has said it. Apparently, this is not a movie. Oh, I see, Scooter. Gotcha. It's not a movie. It's a Broadway show, and I've never heard of it. And it's about a girl who wants to bring her girlfriend, so it's got that angle. Okay. The Broadway show is called The Prom. The show, which debuted on Broadway in 2018, earned a slew of Tony nominations and critical acclaim. There you go, gang. All right, well, we had a great night tonight. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Tomorrow night, we've got the Independence Gang, 10 p.m. Eastern. It'll be on the Independence Gang YouTube, Twitch, D-Live, Trovo, Rumble, and Foxhole. A lot of platforms. I'm gonna expand this show, too, and maybe do this on a couple of those other platforms, too. Not that it matters. Again, we don't have to worry about being banned here or suspended or beaten up or whatever the heck YouTube does to people. We don't have to worry about that on this channel or for this particular program. So thankfully. Anyway, I leaned over and her performing goose. Nice, Scooter. Nice. Thanks for being here, everybody. Love you all, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.